There is a specific kind of person who will open Instagram, type out something real, something raw and honest and true, and then sit there staring at it for 30 seconds before quietly deleting every word and putting their phone face down on the table. Not because they had nothing to say, but because something inside them whispered, "Nobody needs to see this," and they listened. Again, if that is you, stay with me, because what I am about to share with you is not about social media strategy or how to grow a following or why you should post more. This is about something much deeper than that. This is about who you actually are, why you go invisible in spaces where everyone else seems to perform so effortlessly, and what that quiet disappearing act is actually costing you. Let's start with the psychology, because there is a real reason this happens, and it is not weakness, it is not insecurity in the way most people think about insecurity. It is actually a direct consequence of one of your greatest gifts, and the fact that nobody ever told you that gift needed a boundary: empaths. And I am using that word loosely to describe people who feel things deeply, who pick up on the emotions of others like a radio antenna picking up signals, who are genuinely moved by suffering and genuinely lit up by someone else's joy. These people experience social media in a fundamentally different way than others do. Where a more emotionally insulated person might post a photo and feel basically neutral while waiting for likes, you are not neutral. You are already imagining how people will receive it. You are already inside their minds, feeling their potential reactions before you have even hit share. You are preemptively absorbing an emotional experience that hasn't happened yet, and your nervous system is treating it like it already has. That is exhausting. That is genuinely, physiologically exhausting, and it is happening to you every single time you even consider putting yourself out there online. There is a psychological concept called the imaginary audience, first described by developmental psychologist David Elkind. He used it to describe teenagers who feel like everyone is watching and judging their every move. But here is what they did not tell you in psychology class. Empaths never fully outgrow this, not because they are immature, but because they're mirror neurons, the neurons in the brain responsible for empathizing with and simulating others' experiences, are overactive. You are literally more wired to simulate what other people are thinking and feeling than the average person. So when you imagine posting something, your brain runs a simulation that is far more detailed, far more emotionally textured, and far more distressing than it would be for someone less empathetic. You are not being dramatic, you are being neurologically you. And here is the layer underneath that, the one that really gets people. Most empaths have spent their whole lives learning to read rooms. You learned early, maybe very early, that your emotional safety depended on understanding the people around you. Whether it was a volatile parent, an unpredictable friendship, a home where love felt conditional, something taught you to tune in to others with extreme sensitivity, and you got very, very good at it. But the cost of that skill was that you also became extraordinarily vulnerable to disapproval, because you care. You care in a way that goes all the way down to your bones. So when you think about posting something personal online, and you imagine even one person rolling their eyes, even one comment that is cold or dismissive, even one silence where you hoped for warmth, your body responds like that threat is real and present. Because to you emotionally, it is. Your nervous system does not fully distinguish between imagined social rejection and actual social rejection. It reacts to both. And so you go quiet. You curate. You post the safe things, the sunset photos, the vague quotes that could mean anything, the celebration of someone else's achievement. You make yourself just visible enough to exist online without actually being seen. Because being seen feels like standing in the middle of a room with your chest open, and you have been taught somewhere along the way that open chests get hurt. Now I want you to really sit with this next part, because this is where it gets both harder and more liberating. There is a particular kind of person who will spend hours crafting a heartfelt comment on someone else's post. Hours choosing the right words to make a stranger feel understood. Hours showing up fully and vulnerably in the comments section, in the DMs, in the support of other people's dreams and pain and joy. And that same person will not post a single thing about their own life for weeks, maybe months, maybe years. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And the pattern has a name. It is called self-erasure. And it is something that deeply empathetic people are particularly prone to, because somewhere in the wiring of how you learn to love, you learned that your needs, your visibility, your presence was less important than the emotional comfort of the people around you. You became the supporter, the encourager, the one who makes everyone else feel seen, and you are extraordinary at it. But there is a quiet grief underneath that role that I think you already know about, because sometimes you scroll through your feed and you see people living loudly and expressing freely, and you feel something that is not quite envy, but is close to it. Not because you want attention, but because you want to matter. You want to take up space without apologizing for it. You want to say something true and have someone say, yes, me too, without having to first go through the terror of possibly being misunderstood. Here is a truth that might sting just a little. Some of your silence is about protection. Genuine, understandable, self-preserving protection. But some of it, and this is the part one wants you to gently face, some of it is a habit. A deeply ingrained, emotionally comfortable habit of making yourself small, because small feels safe. Small does not get criticized. Small does not disappoint anyone. Small does not have to carry the weight of being seen and then found lacking. But here is what small also does. Small keeps you lonely. Small keeps your actual voice, your actual perspective, your actual story from reaching the people who desperately need to hear it. And here is the thing about empaths that most people miss. Your voice is not just valuable, it is rare. Because you do not speak from ego, you speak from genuine feeling. And in a world that is absolutely saturated with people performing confidence and curating highlight reels, someone who speaks from genuine feeling is not just refreshing, it is revolutionary. The people who need you most are not looking for a perfectly lit selfie with a motivational caption. They are scrolling through walls of noise, hoping to find something that sounds like a real human being. And you, the person who feels everything, the person who chooses words carefully, the person who would never post something just for attention, because your conscience won't allow it, you are exactly what they are looking for. And yet you keep deleting. Let me tell you about something called emotional perfectionism, because I think this is sitting right at the center of your relationship with social media. Emotional perfectionism is the belief, usually unconscious, that your emotions need to be fully resolved, fully understood, and fully presentable before they are worth sharing. It is the feeling that you can only post when you have something profound to say, that you can only open up when you have already processed the thing completely. That raw is somehow inappropriate. That messy is somehow irresponsible. Where do you think that belief came from? Because most empaths can trace it back to a moment or a series of moments where their emotional expression was too much for someone, too intense, too sensitive, too dramatic, and they learned to compress themselves down into something more manageable, something that would not make others uncomfortable, something that would not rock the boat. You learned to wait until you had it together before you opened your mouth. And now, even online, even behind a screen, even in a space where you could technically say anything, you are still waiting. You are waiting to be articulate enough, interesting enough, healed enough, certain enough. And that wait has no end, because the bar keeps moving. Because the real issue is not that you are not ready. The real issue is that somewhere deep in you, you believe that the unpolished version of you is not worth showing up. And that belief is a lie that your past experiences handed you, and you have been carrying it for so long it feels like truth. Think about the empaths you admire, the writers, the speakers, the creators who make you feel so deeply understood when you consume their work. Do you think they had it all figured out when they started? Do you think they posted without fear? Do you think they did not lie awake wondering if they were too much or too weird or too raw? They did. The difference is not that they stopped feeling afraid. The difference is that they decided that the fear of staying silent was greater than the fear of being seen. And here is the wildly counterintuitive thing about vulnerability and social media for empaths. You think that going quiet is how you protect yourself from being hurt, but going quiet is also how you cut yourself off from the exact connection you are starving for. Because connection, real connection, not just scrolling and liking and consuming, real connection requires you to be known. And being known requires you to show yourself, even imperfectly, even messily, even before you have it all figured out. Every time you delete the real thing and post the safe thing, you get a little hit of relief, followed by a slow leak of loneliness. Because the safe version of you cannot receive real love. It can receive likes. It can receive surface-level validation. But it cannot receive the thing you actually want, which is to be seen in your fullness and accepted anyway. That is the quiet tragedy of the empath who goes invisible online. You are so skilled at making others feel less alone, and you are sitting in so much loneliness yourself. And I want to say something here that I need you to actually hear. You have convinced yourself that you stay off social media because you are above it, because it is toxic or shallow or not worth your energy. And maybe some of that is true, but if you are completely honest with yourself, underneath that narrative, is there a part of you that is simply scared? Scared of the comments, scared of the silence, scared of putting something real out and having no one respond, scared that your actual inner world, the one that feels so vast and so significant when you are alone with it, might look small or silly or ordinary to someone else. You are allowed to have that fear. It makes complete sense, but you are not allowed to dress it up as wisdom if it is actually avoidance. That is the loving challenge I am here to offer you today. Now, what do you actually do with all of this? First, you get curious instead of critical. Instead of beating yourself up for going quiet, you get interested in what is actually happening when you pull back. The next time you type something real and then delete it, pause before you put the phone down. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid will happen? Get specific. Who are you imagining judging you? What are they saying? Because most of the time, when you actually pull the fear out of the shadows and look at it, it is either a very small number of people whose opinion you have given far too much power, or it is a completely invented audience that does not exist in the numbers your anxiety suggests. Second, you start experimenting with what I call micro-visibility. You do not have to write a vulnerable essay. You do not have to go live and cry. You just have to take one small step closer to your actual self. Post something that reflects your real taste, your actual humor, a question you are genuinely sitting with. Not performance, not content, just one honest signal that the real you is in there, and see what happens. Third, you begin to separate other people's discomfort from your responsibility. Because one of the deepest reasons empaths go quiet on social media is that they have unconsciously decided they are responsible for how everyone will feel about what they share. If someone does not like it, it becomes your fault for posting it. If someone misunderstands you, it becomes your failure for not being clearer. If someone is bothered, it becomes your job to manage that. But that is not connection. That is emotional servitude, and you do not have to keep offering yourself up that way. Your job is not to make sure no one is ever uncomfortable with your existence. Your job is to show up honestly and let people choose whether it resonates with them. And finally, and this might be the most important thing I could say to you, you have to start grieving the version of yourself that was taught to disappear. Not with anger, with compassion, because that version of you was doing the best they could with what they had. The kid who learned to read the room obsessively, the teenager who made themselves invisible to keep the peace, the adult who became everyone's safe person while having nowhere safe to go themselves. That person was surviving, and that person got you here. But here is where you are now. You are not a child in an unsafe room anymore. You are an adult with the actual capacity to choose what you do with your voice. And some of the rooms you are afraid of online, those rooms are not unsafe. They only feel that way because the old wiring is still running. You do not have to overhaul everything overnight. You do not have to suddenly become someone who posts daily or shares everything or performs vulnerability for an audience. But you do have to decide, at some point, whether you are going to keep letting the most scared part of you make all the decisions. Because that part of you, the one that keeps deleting the real stuff, it is not protecting you from harm anymore. It is protecting you from connection. And that is a very different thing. There are people out there right now, scrolling, looking for someone who sounds like you, someone who thinks the way you think, someone who feels the way you feel, someone who will say the thing they have been unable to say. And every day that you stay quiet, they are still looking. That thought used to make you feel better about hiding because you would tell yourself, I'm not ready yet. But maybe today is the day you let it be the reason you stop. You do not need to be louder. You do not need to be more polished or more confident or more certain. You just need to be a little more willing to be found. Because the world does not need more noise. It needs more of what you actually have, which is depth and warmth and the kind of honesty that makes people feel less alone at 2 a.m. when they cannot sleep and they are wondering if anyone else in the world feels the way they feel. You do, and they need to know that. So the next time you type something real and your finger hovers over delete, I want you to remember this. Silence is not safety. It is just a more comfortable kind of loneliness. And you have been lonely long enough.